See, long before movie tie-in games became something people usually ignored, there was one that quietly earned a reputation for actually being much better than anyone expected. Disney's The Jungle Book arrived during the 16-bit era and quickly became one of the most memorable platformers on both the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. It looked beautiful, sounded exactly like a Disney adventure, and challenged players with a surprisingly difficult levels that demanded lots of careful jumping, reactions, and a little patience as well. Where years later, people still remember swinging through the trees, escaping elephants, avoiding attacks, and finally standing face to face with Shere Khan. Maybe that's why the idea of a remake continues sort of showing up whenever fans talk about that classic Disney games that actually deserve another chance. So, first thing to mention is that there is currently no official announcement for a Jungle Book game remake. Disney hasn't revealed any plans to revisit the classic 1994 platformer, and no developer has confirmed that such a project is in production. Even so, interest in reviving older Disney games has grown considerably over the last several years, especially after successful remasters and collections reminded players just how many great adventures came from that era. Among those classics, well, The Jungle Book has always been part of the conversation. One of the biggest reasons is actually just the setting. Think about it, very few platformers have ever captured the feeling of exploring a living jungle quite like this one did. Every stage completely felt different, even though they all took place inside the same wilderness. The original, in fact, had already a fantastic foundation. Modern technology could simply allow that foundation to become everything people imagined when they first played it. Like, the biggest opportunity isn't making the jungle larger or something like that, it's making it feel just basically alive. Like, imagine walking through the forest without immediately thinking about the enemies or the objectives, and sun barely squeezing through the thick leaves, or the monkeys all chattering in the distance, insects buzz around flowers growing beside the path, and the sound of a nearby waterfall just slowly getting louder as you continue walking. Nothing is trying to impress you basically, nothing feels scripted, the jungle simply exists, and after only a few minutes, you begin feeling like you're actually the visitor instead of the place existing for you. That's exactly how this should feel. Then, almost without realization, the mood changes. A group of these deers suddenly run past, birds explode into the sky, everything goes quiet. Somewhere nearby, Shere Khan is hunting. Moments like that, in fact, don't need explosions or dramatic cutscenes or whatever. They create tension simply because nature itself starts behaving differently. That's something modern games can finally do incredibly well, and it would fit the Jungle Book perfectly. The original game always understood that the jungle wasn't just scenery, it was the main character. Every stage had its own personality without ever feeling disconnected from the rest of the world, so a remake could finally turn that idea into something much bigger. Rivers naturally flowing into larger lakes, massive trees stretching hundreds of feet into the air, hidden caves disappear behind waterfalls, ancient ruins slowly sink beneath roots that have been growing for centuries. Everywhere you look, it should feel like the jungle has existed before you've arrived. Movement deserves just as much love because that's where platforming either succeeds or completely falls apart. The protagonist shouldn't move like a superhero. He's quick because he grows up in the jungle, not because he has magical abilities. Climbing vines, jumping across branches, sliding beneath trees, balancing over rivers, and swinging from one part of the forest to another one should all just connect together so naturally that traveling becomes just as enjoyable as reaching the destination. The best platformers, in fact, always make players smile simply because moving feels good. The animals deserve far more personality than simple enemies waiting to be defeated. Wolves travel together because they're protecting the territory. Elephants reshape parts of the jungle as enormous herds move across familiar paths. Monkeys don't just attack, they tease you. Steal items, disappear into the trees, and challenge you to catch them or whatever. Even smaller creatures like snakes or crocodiles become memorable because they behave like an actual animal instead of animated obstacles. Suddenly, the jungle stops feeling like a video game level and starts feeling like a place where life continues whether you are there or not. The Disney characters could become even stronger if they're woven naturally into the adventure instead of appearing only when the story requires them. Baloo shouldn't simply show up to tell jokes before disappearing again. He becomes someone Mowgli regularly crosses paths with while exploring, always offering encouragement in his own relaxed way. Bagheera quietly watches from the shadows, stepping in only when absolutely necessary because he trusts Mowgli to figure things out on his own. Kaa then becomes genuinely unsettling, not because he's louder or scarier than before, but because players never know when they will hear that familiar voice just coming through the jungle. And Shere Khan shouldn't feel like another boss waiting at the end of the game. His presence should follow players almost from the beginning, making every encounter feel personal long before the final confrontation finally arrives. One thing that could really separate a remake from the original is allowing curiosity to become the player's greatest reward. Maybe you notice strange markings carved into a forgotten stone somewhere. Maybe climbing an enormous tree reveals a valley you never knew existed. Like maybe a narrow tunnel behind a waterfall leads into some ancient ruins untouched for generations. None of these discoveries need giant rewards attached to them. Sometimes simply finding somewhere beautiful is just enough for the player. And visually, of course, the game almost demands an artistic approach instead of photorealism. Disney animations always relied on color, warmth, personality, and the remake should embrace exactly that. On another hand, of course, sound might honestly become the game's secret weapon. Like imagine spending several quiet minutes hearing nothing but leaves just moving in the wind, distant birds, insects hiding beneath the grass, flowing water, and the occasional monkey somewhere above the trees. Then, without warning, every sound suddenly disappears except for one deep growl somewhere ahead. Shere Khan. Nothing else needs to happen, players already know they're in danger. Moments like that stay with people far longer than another scripted action sequence ever could. The music should work the same way. Disney's unforgettable melodies as a beautiful new orchestral arrangements, but they shouldn't constantly dominate the experience. Sometimes the jungle should provide the soundtrack entirely on its own, other times familiar themes quietly return just long enough to remind players why they fell in love with them in the first place, years ago. Maybe that's why people still talk about the Jungle Book after all this time. It wasn't trying to become the biggest platformer ever made, it simply invited players into one of Disney's most magical worlds and trusted the world to carry the adventure. That's a surprisingly rare quality today. If a remake ever happens, it doesn't need hundreds of hours of content or an enormous open world, it just simply needs to make players feel like they're spending an unforgettable summer growing up alongside wolves, climbing trees that seem to touch the clouds, escaping one of Disney's greatest villains, and slowly discovering that the jungle isn't just where Mowgli lives, it's where he belongs. That's the feeling people remember. And that's exactly the feeling a remake should basically bring back.